So hello and welcome to Ewe Sew You. My name's Zoe and this is my channel all about the crafty bits and pieces I get up to. I knit, I sew, I spin on a spindle, I dabble in weaving from time to time, and anything else that takes my crafty fancy. But this week we're talking about fitting garments, so grab a brew, put your feet up and let's get started. So welcome back to any returning viewers, and to any new viewers, a very warm welcome to you. If you've been hanging out here for a while, you may remember that at the beginning of the year I set myself the goal of improving my fitting and finishing techniques. Well, I'm starting on that journey now, and what you're going to be seeing over the course of the next few months, over the course of the year effectively, is a series of studio vlog style videos where I'm working specifically on my fitting techniques, and then alongside that a separate series of videos where I'll show you how I go about carrying out finishing techniques as I use them. Now, what I thought would be a good idea, and this is very much Zoe logic, is to start by taking a closer look at my body shape to give me a better sense of what I'm working with and what issues I might face in terms of fit that I'll need to address. This way I can go into my first trial having looked at the types of adjustments that I'm likely to need to make before I get started. Now, the way that I've approached this is to create a croquis of my body. If you're not familiar with a croquis, it's the name for a design sketch to show how garments are intended to fit the body. Now, you can use your own body measurements to create a croquis or look for one that has a similar body shape and proportion to yourself. But I figured it would be simpler and more accurate to trace it from photos. So what I did was take photos of myself in my underwear, which was illuminating to say the least, and no, I am not showing you the photos. Once I had the photos and printed them out, I was able to trace them to give myself a silhouette of my figure from different angles. I can then scan these traces back into the computer and print off as many copies as I need to use over and over again. So I have a pile of croquis here, so let's take a look at them and see what I'm working with. Goes without saying that the purpose of this exercise is to create garments that fit the body I currently have. It is not an opportunity for comments on changing my body in any way. If I waited to make well-fitting garments until my body matched society's ideal body type, I'd have to move to a nudist colony. Any form of negativity or advice on diet and fitness in the comments will be deleted. This is not the channel for that. So in this croquis, we can see that I'm a little short-waisted. This means that this section of my body here is a bit shorter than the other sections, and the waist is quite high up on the torso. You can actually see that a little bit more clearly in this version of the croquis where I've drawn the lines on. So this section, and this section are fairly even, but this section is noticeably shorter than the others. So yes, the proportions are going to be key there. So returning to this version of the croquis without the lines on it, we can see that my shoulder and hip width is quite even, that I've got quite solid thighs, and my waist is not particularly well defined. Now, given that even at my slimmest, I didn't have a particularly well defined waist, this is not a weight related shape as such, it's just the way I'm built. So if I want to create the illusion of a more defined waist, I'm going to need to think about what's going on in the upper part of my torso, as well as from the hips down, to sort of create that illusion. So let's take a look at another angle. This is my back view, and again we can see the natural proportions of my body. I mean, there's not a great deal else to say here compared to the first view. Obviously, we've got my buttocks here, which will become of interest when fitting trousers and shorts. But otherwise, we're again thinking mostly about proportions to balance out where the waist is lacking in definition and that short-waistedness. So when we look at a side view, we actually start to see where most of my fitting issues are coming from. Once it goes into focus, there we are. Okay, so as you can see, I have quite a prominent stomach coming down here, and it begins from right under the bust all the way down to my hips. So similarly, my bottom is pretty prominent, creating a curve at the bottom of my back here. Now, I believe this would be classified as a sway back, and that can cause issues with fitting the backs of things. Finally, let's think about my bust. Now, I don't have the most heaving of bosoms, but there is a noticeable difference between my high bust and my full bust. Now, at the last time of measuring, which was just the other day, my high bust, which is kind of here, was 42.25 inches, and my full bust, so the widest point, is 44.5 inches. So that's a 2.25 inch difference and places me in a B cup for most dressmaking patterns. Now, that's not always the same as your bra measurement. Bra measurements depend on the style of the bra and your underbust measurements more than the difference between the upper and the full bust. In addition, my bust sits directly on my stomach bulge. There's barely any space here between the two, which is why I quite often have difficulty finding a comfortable bra, particularly underwired ones. Seams here can become uncomfortable as well if the fit's not exactly right, so that's an area that I'm going to need to think about. So that's what I'm working with and some of the potential areas that may need addressing when it comes to fitting garments. So what are my next steps? Well, I have a couple of patterns and fabrics already lined up for projects with a focus on fit. First up, we have the Bridey button-up blouse and dress by Pattern Scout. Now, I haven't quite decided yet whether I'll be doing the shirt length or the dress length or even somewhere between the two, but I figured a shirt would be a really good starting point for getting better fit. I'll start by using the line drawings to put the garment onto one of my croquis to give a sense of how I want it to fit me, and then I'll make up a toile and some polycotton that I've got in stash with no other purpose than wearable muslins. From there, I'll be able to see what adjustments I need to make to get the fit that I want before making up the garment in the final fabric. And that'll be the next few videos in this particular series. After that, I'll be taking the same approach with Butterick 6018, which is a vintage dress pattern. It's actually a reproduction of a 1952 pattern, so it's rather more complicated from a fitting perspective. So keep an eye out for future videos in this fitting series to see what adjustments I end up making. And in the meantime, you might be interested in this video where I show you how I bound the seams on my truffle coat.